Welcome back, everyone. Ian Patrick here, and as you can see, we finally have a new set. I figured we're past 100 episodes. It's time to change things up a little bit. Now, I'm usually not a big fan of change. However, I think that it's been years since we've changed where we were filming, and I've been putting a lot of work into this set the past few weeks. I have all my movie books on this side. I'm sure eventually I'll change things up a bit. This isn't permanent. I may make the camera closer to me. I obviously need a mic stand that'll reach me, that comes from the floor. We'll mix things up quite a bit. Maybe the lighting isn't perfect. So this isn't permanent, but of course we always have to have our good friend Errol Flynn next to us. Now, I wish we had a better movie to kick off this new set with. Now, I have a 20th Century Fox picture tonight, Lloyd's of London, and this picture was made in 1936. However, it wasn't released until 1937. Now, it was directed by Henry King, and we've seen some pretty good Henry King films here on this channel. It stars, top billing is little Freddie Bartholomew, and obviously we just watched him in David Copperfield. I loved him in that. I love that picture. There are some similarities between the two, just in the fact that we start out as a young boy and then we get older. Now in this picture, the young boy, his name is Jonathan Blake. Jonathan Blake is the main character in this movie. Jonathan Blake is played by Freddie Bartholomew when he's young. When he's older, Tyrone Power. Now, but Freddie Bartholomew still got top billing. And this was Tyrone Power's first leading role in a film, in a major production, which is really cool. In fact, 20th Century Fox wasn't quite sure about him being the star. We'll read about that when we get to the history. But they took a gamble, and eventually Tyrone Power became a huge Hollywood star. Now, this also has Madeleine Carroll in this. Madeleine Carroll, she plays Lady Elizabeth. George Sanders, you all know I love George Sanders. He's such a scoundrel. And this was actually like his first villain role, his first of many to come. I forgot to note that Tyrone Power was only 22 at the time of making this picture. Which is kind of crazy because I'm a lot older than he is right now, but I still think he looks older than me. George Sanders, he plays Lord Stacy, a very snobbish aristocrat, basically what you would picture George Sanders playing. Virginia Field also is in this. She plays Polly, sort of this barmaid who shows her cleavage quite a bit throughout the film. I will note that this picture right now is on YouTube, free to watch. That's where I watched the movie. So just, YouTube Lloyd's of London, and you should find it. It's pretty good quality. So now I will start out by saying there's a beautiful setting at the start. We see a young boy, Freddie Bartholomew. He plays Jonathan Blake, and we can kind of tell that he is sort of a wild boy, kind of like the old Huckleberry Finn type story. He has a best friend, Tom Sawyer, but his best friend is actually played by another little boy actor. I don't recall his name, but his best friend is Lord Nelson, who Lord Nelson was obviously famous for fighting against Napoleon at sea. So his little friend is a little Lord Nelson, and it starts out where they both sort of go on an adventure together. I loved it. They sneak onto a ship, and they learn that there's some sort of insurance fraud scam going on with these pirates. They're kind of like pirates, and they overhear that they're gonna sink a ship on purpose and do this awful thing. So the boys have to run away from these pirate-like people, and they jump into the water, and thankfully they escape. And we then cut scene to Lord Nelson is basically being told by his father, look, you need to start being more of a man. So you're going to go off with your uncle or something of the sorts, or a family friend, where you're going to learn how to be a seaman. And good thing that happened, because Lord Nelson is a very, very important person in history. Now, on the other hand, Jonathan Blake, Freddie Bartholomew, he, great actor. I loved him in this picture too. I liked him more than Tyrone Power, to be honest. He says, you know what, I'm going to go on to the Lloyd's coffee house in London to warn them about this fraud that's going to occur, this scam, insurance fraud. So it kind of reminded me of Copperfield, where he goes on a long walk, about 100 miles. He walks to the Lloyd's coffee house. It was a coffee house at that time. He walks a long way to tell them about this plan, and he warns them about it. And then they quickly say, you know what? Thank you so much for doing this for us. How would you like to basically learn the trade? And little Freddie Bartholomew, Jonathan Blake, is super excited to do it. And I would say Freddie Bartholomew was in the picture for only about 30 minutes. And it's unfortunate, because I wish he had been in it, for an hour, kind of like in David Copperfield. And it's interesting that he's top billed, because he's not in it that much. And then we quickly see Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power is introduced in a very interesting way, where he's on trial for like a peeping Tom case. Obviously, he wasn't actually a peeping Tom, but he's on trial for peeping Tom. He gets off with that. We see that he's actually a successful man at the Lloyd's house, insurance house. But he's kind of wild. He's still wild. In fact, he's a successful successful investigator for the house. He goes on dangerous missions. He goes to France, sort of as a spy for the house, the insurance company. One thing that annoyed me so much, maybe it won't annoy you all, is that Freddie Bartholomew obviously is British. He has a British accent. And then, bam, we have an American playing Jonathan. And those types of things annoy me. He's like, no, he doesn't have a British accent. He doesn't even try to have a British accent. But funny enough, when he goes to France, Tyrone Power spoke pretty good French, I must say. So I kind of wish they had chosen someone like, I don't know, John Mills, or even like Frank Lawton, who was in Copperfield, who played the older David Copperfield. Just someone British to keep that going. I don't know. Just a minor complaint, but to me, it bothered me actually quite a bit. So when he's on this mission, he falls in love because he meets Madeleine Carroll, Lord Stacy. He meets her there. They escape together. But she leaves him in kind of a sketchy way, I must say, because she's already married to George Sanders, of course. And as I said, this is his first sort of villain role. And we learn that when Jonathan Blake learns that she's already married, he essentially vows, I will become super successful, I will become wealthy, because he wants her to feel guilty. It's sort of like when we get dumped and then we're like, okay, I'm gonna lose a bunch of weight, I'm gonna get to my peak. So he kind of does the same sort of thing, where he realizes she's married to this super wealthy guy, rich guy, so he's gonna become a success himself, and he does get that. So during the whole picture, there's this backstory of Jonathan helping Lord Nelson fight Napoleon at sea, that he backs Napoleon. He keeps everyone at the Lloyd's Lloyd's insurance company in London, everyone motivated to continue to back the ships to keep putting money into the war, because Lord Nelson is this very high, powerful commander. He's like the head of the Navy, the British Navy at the time. So there's this backstory going on the whole time. And I have to note that if you want to see a really good Lord Nelson picture, you need to see that Hamilton woman with Laurence Olivier and Vivian Leigh. I've seen that picture about 3 times now, and I saw it actually not too long ago, and I was so upset with myself I didn't review it at that time either, because that's one that really, one day I promise I will review. That's a great picture, a great story about Lord Nelson. So anyway, the insurance companies are going bankrupt, and he has to keep his promise to Lord Nelson, the promise he made when they were just little boys, that they'll basically always be there for each other. And one thing I really didn't like was he lies to everyone, to basically everyone in England, because he lies saying that Lord Nelson defeated Napoleon in a huge battle. He lies to everyone, giving everyone false hope. Now, of course, Nelson eventually does defeat him, but it just really bothered me that he lied to everyone like that. I know he was doing it out of the goodness of his heart, but I don't know. It bothered me. Maybe it won't bother you all. He did it for a good cause. I get that, but it still annoyed me. So the ending, I won't go into too much detail of the end, but the very, very ending where he's staring out the window, I thought it was kind of lame. I thought it was really cheesy. He hears drums. He learns that his good friend Lord Nelson has passed away in battle, and he just stares out the window. And I didn't care for the ending. I'm going to give this movie a 2.5 stars. I think it's a very, very forgettable movie. I won't ever see this movie again. It's interesting because, sometimes I read like Leonard Maltin review books and other review books, which I'll do a review of, or I'll just do kind of a look at some of my books like that because they're interesting. And most of those books give this picture like a 3 stars. I think Leonard Maltin gave it a 3.5, and I was blown away by high of a rating they give this one. So I'm curious what you all think of this movie. Would you all give it a 2.5? Do you all think it's sort of forgettable? But I'm going to stick with 2.5. So let's read some of the history. This is the part that's always difficult when I do videos holding the mic, so bear with me. There's actually some pretty good history about this in my Tyrone Power book. Let's see. Lloyd's of London was 20th most ambitious production up to that time. The front office wanted to showcase the new star as effectively as possible. Sebastian, basically the makeup guy, acquired an eyebrow plucker which had an air hose attachment. He shaped Tyrone's eyebrows with it, then shaved off the area over Ty's nose. He didn't pluck the hairs there because this might cause swelling. Quote, every time I got Ty down in the chair, he'd get up swearing, "I'll kill you." He said, "Those damn brows nearly drove us both nuts." Shooting had been underway for 2 weeks when Zanuck, the producer, called King into his office one morning. He walked around the room swinging his polo mallet. He said, "Henry, I've been watching the rushes very carefully. This boy up to now is good. He's just perfect. I know you have a tight schedule. I just want to give you this authority. I want you to know that I don't want you to hurry with this boy at any time. If we went out and got Frederick March or somebody of that kind, we would have to pay him 150 grand. We're paying this boy peanuts. Take your time on every scene. If you go over the budget or go beyond, don't spare anything on this boy. He's going to be a star. That's all I wanted to tell you. Keep up the good work. Do the best you can, but don't hurry him. Now that Ray Sebastian, the makeup guy, had worked on him, she had no difficulty bringing out Ty's good looks. Quote, he had no bad angles. He was just plain good looking. You didn't have to worry about photographing his bad side. He didn't have any. Although she didn't recall that the scenes required many takes, had there been more of a rush, there might have been some energy in the picture, particularly in Ty's portrayal. Seen today, it's not clear how Lloyd's of London, a dreary historical epic ranging from 1770 to 1805, could make a star out of anybody. I agree. Ty was adorned in everything but petticoats, his scalp hugged by a wig so tight it pinched his whole face, with enough makeup on the lips to make one understand why he and his future co-star would be dismissed as, quote, pretty Miss Young, pretty Mr. Power. The ponderous plot structure, basically then it goes talking about the plot. But the movie was actually pretty successful. Let's see. It says, Freddie Bartholomew loses little of his charm as he grows into Tyrone Power. I don't agree with that statement. Power is the ambitious youth who can see so far ahead of the old fogies whose head Lloyd's that he can very, very nearly predict the crash of 1929. Now, one other interesting thing I wanted to note was that Zanuck originally did not want Tyrone Power to play the part. He wanted a mesh. Where is it? Don Amesh to play the part. In fact, he was adamant about Don Amesh playing the part, but Henry King went to bat for Tyrone Power. He basically put his reputation, I guess, on the line because they put a ton of money into this picture. 20th Century Fox did. Now, let's look at George Sanders' autobiography, which I've been reading, because he has a little snippet about the picture. He says, having nothing to do, I went to Hollywood, where 20th Century Fox bought my slightly scorched contract and put me into Lloyd's of London with Tyrone Power. I had had since the beginning a profound sense of unreality about my newly acquired profession, with the atmosphere of Hollywood, which the atmosphere of Hollywood did nothing to dispel. I never really thought I would make the grade, and let's face it, I haven't. Basically saying he wasn't a huge star, but George Sanders was a very big star. So, but I think he's sort of saying, I'm not like a Cary Grant type of star. And here, for one last thing, I have a picture of Tyrone Power from the picture with all that makeup on. Now, you all may have noticed that I'm still getting used to the set. It's really complicated. It's a complicated setup, so just bear with me. I hope you all like it. I think it's more comfy. It'll eventually get more comfy, I promise. So I've got to figure out how I'm going to have my notes, because right now it's like really low down here. I'm sure eventually you may all kind of see my notes, but it's not that big of a deal in my opinion. But let me know your thoughts of Lloyd's of London. Very forgettable in my mind. Won't ever see it again. Worth one watch, I guess. 2.5 stars isn't that high, but I didn't leave the movie upset that I spent 2 hours watching it. So worth a watch. But here we are, another set of 100 pictures. Don't forget, as of right now, I'm only 2 subscribers away from 300 subscribers. So once I get 2 more, I'll be sure to post my 100th episode, which will be a really special one.